Hello YouTube, in this video we're going to create our first enemy and then use the cooldown node to have the enemies shoot lasers. But first, before I begin, I want to show that we moved the shredder into the prefabs folder. Alright, and let's get started. In the sprites folder, I'm going to find the blue enemy, drag him to the hierarchy, and I'm going to rename it enemy 01. This enemy will just move straight down the screen. Alright, so let's add a box collider 2D with trigger. Then we'll add a rigid body 2D and set the gravity scale to 0. And then we'll add our flow script controller. Create new bound. And I'm going to search for a rigid body 2D velocity. I'm going to set the velocity, and I'm going to use a vector2 variable for speed. And that'll allow us in the future to move the enemy both left, right, and up and down if we want to. But for now, I'll just set the speed to -2. And this will happen on start. And I'm going to put this in a group called movement. And then we'll test it out by clicking on play. It's moving down the screen in a straight line. Alright, now I'll create the cooldown node, which has a time property. You can see that in the box, and currently it's set to 1. But before we can use this node, we need to create the enemy lasers. So if we drag the red laser up into the hierarchy, we'll rename it to enemy laser. And then we're going to add a tag called enemy laser. And we'll assign it to the game object. Add a box collider 2D. And I'm going to modify the collider size just a little bit. And we'll add a rigid body 2D with a gravity scale of 0. And a flow script controller. I'm actually going to rotate the laser around the Z-axis by 180 degrees, so it's pointed down. And now let's create new bound. We're going to search for a rigid body 2D velocity. And we'll set the velocity with a value of -10. And this will happen on start. Let's test it out. All right. Let's prefab the enemy laser. Let's go back to enemy 01. Using the cooldown, we're going to go to Functions, Implemented, Unity, Instantiate. And from the cooldown tab, we'll drag from the Finish port into the Instantiate node, so it'll occur whenever it hits the time. And we'll add the enemy laser prefab to the Instantiate node. Right, now we're going to create a new game object variable called me. We'll drag that to the canvas and let's drag enemy 01 into the value slot. Then from that variable, we'll drag it into position and parent, and let's set the rotation to 180. Alright, and we want to call this on update. We'll plug that into the cooldown node, delete the enemy laser, and let's test it. So every 1 second, it's shooting a laser. All right, let's drag the enemy up, and let's set the cooldown to 0.5 just so you can see that it is changing. It's firing a lot faster now. Let's go ahead and set it back to 1 again. And again, you can set these values to whatever you want for your game. I'm just going to leave it at 1 for now. I'm going to prefab the enemy. Let's just drag it over. I'm dragging a few more enemies just to see that everything works okay. Alright, looks good. All the lasers are appearing under the enemies. Let's go ahead and delete these prefabs. Well, actually, I forgot to put a group around the shooting nodes, so let's do that now. And let's rename this to shoot. And apply. Alright, that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll give the enemy some health, and then we'll deal with enemy damage, destroying the enemy, and adding some sound effects. So I hope to see you then.